Rich.
Raine changes.
But looks like you.
But definitely,
Butch haircut?
but this one specifically names Hank though, so you know.
Department stuff. And so I don't recall.
You?
Give me a minute. Give me a minute.
That's it.
You got?
And then I got, this is the department.
Oh, this extension.
Well, if you find anything in there interesting,
I'll let you know.
here's it from me. Oh,
Email it to you with high priority. Do yourself a favor and send it, so I'm gonna put that in just a minute. Okay, where's mine? We need our legal bill.
That's a good email from,
See this guy?
Grant, that was a good email from Are you gonna suggest changes to?
You want,
Okay, we can start now.
I stopped.
You're allowed.
we gotta let him turn and get his computer jacked up. Hey, you know when the meeting starts, when the chairman calls the order, so don't worry about it. Horses, holy shit.
I know.
I don't want the horses.
I'd like to call this meeting of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners back to order. Record show it's approximately 8:30 in the morning on May 13th. All right, let's start off with a Pledge of Allegiance, led by another one of our veterans, Commissioner Capurro, please.
Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Suzanne, can you please give us a roll call of the commission?
Chairman Raine,
Present.
Vice Chairman Lynn,
President.
Commissioner Capurro,
Here?
Commissioner Cavan,
here.
Commissioner Howell,
Here.
Commissioner Macbeth,
Here.
Commissioner Schrum,
Here.
Commissioner Vogler,
Present.
and Commissioner Wallace.
Excellent. County Advisory Boards, can please stand up, identify yourselves and the county which you represent. Go ahead.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County. Gil Young, Carson City.
Candido Bindi, Elko.
Paul Dixon, Clark.
Lynn Bunch, Mineral. Bill Meyer, Lion.
Joe Cram, Pershing. Jim Janae, Lion.
Good morning. Welcome. All right. And welcome everybody else. A fine morning here. Beautiful day to be outside. Item number 5, that's why we're inside.
I make a motion, we move outside.
All right now.
second that motion.
Member items, announcements. Coming to that. Commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action will be scheduled on a future commission agenda. Commissioners, do we have anything? Vice Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, as yesterday I said, I had a letter, and it really should be under correspondence, but I don't see a correspondence, so I'm gonna, if you're with your indulgence, can I put it under member items?
I suppose.
It was a letter, an email from a Beverly Siegel, and she is opposing the bear hunt and said, do yourselves a favor and rescind it. So I want to put that into the record since I forgot to bring it yesterday.
I'll put that in here, this folder. I know I got one email to that effect last night. Probably the same sender.
Yep.
All right. Anybody else? Other items? Anybody else? Anybody else? Seeing nothing else in member items announcements, let's move on to county advisory boards to manage wildlife member items. You may present emergent items this time. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. CABs, come up with anything? All right, seeing none, we'll close county advisory board to manage wildlife member items and move on to item 17, which is public comment. Persons wishing to speak on items not on the agenda should complete a speaker's card and present to the recording secretary. Public comment be limited to 3 minutes. Persons invited to submit comments in writing on the agenda and/or attend and make comment on the item at the commission meeting. No action can be taken by the commission at this time. Any item requiring commission action could be scheduled on a future commission agenda. In addition to this public comment period, public comment limited to 3 minutes per speaker will be allowed on each agenda action item, but not on reports or informational items. How should we do that on the petition? Should we have, that's one,
The petition that's,
it is an action item, but should we allow
let me look at,
further?
do you have the supplement? I never got the supplement. This is just a petition, not the regulation.
This is what I got on that, was these items.
Well, this one.
I was gonna make sure we're legal here.
Yeah, this is the kind we take public comment. It's not a judicial action.
Okay.
It's a legislative action.
All right, so we'll be able to even take it on that one as well. Okay. Public comment. This time, do we have any cards that specifically stated public comment? We'll take them first.
I've got a bunch of cards that, with no item on it. Don Brief Mobley.
Any public comment, anybody? Oh. All right. Anybody that filled out a card, didn't fill out a card? Public comment? Seeing no public comment at all. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Please come up to the microphone there, podium. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Stacy Trivet. I was born and raised in northern Nevada. I've been active in fundraising for Nevada wildlife for many, many years. This commission was given a mandate by our former governor to improve mule deer numbers within our state, and it's well chronicled that you hold the majority of this commission holds a very different view of how that mandate might be met than that of respected biologists, both within and outside our state. You've made the decision to reject the belief that habitat is the major decline of the mule deer population, even mocking the findings of field biologists in a recent Reno Gazette-Journal article. I find it incredibly ironic that you reject what you call Endow's approach of observation management, and yet the basis of your production plan is rooted in secondhand observation. In Gerald Lent's words, my plan is to listen to the people who live with the deer day to day. One is left to surmise that those who live with the deer day to day are the same people who have influenced your decisions in the past, and not those of the biologists who you believe are participating in a grand conspiracy to inhibit mule deer populations throughout the West. Furthermore, your plan rests heavily on predator control. I found several references cited by members of this commission to the fact that one lion kills at one deer per week. And despite numerous studies, including ongoing study by UNR indicating otherwise, you maintain steadfastly this belief. The truth of the matter is that on average, a lion consumes the equivalent of one deer per week. This study currently has 25 lions that are being tracked and over 400 kills have been confirmed. On average, deer or horses make up 40% of their diet. The real irony here is that you don't need to rely on the observations of your friends who live with the deer day to day, or the observation of respected biologists to see that predator management is not the only answer. You need to look no further than the results of 2 experiments in predator management right here in Nevada. In one study conducted by Mr. Schroeder and Mr. Lansford, entitled Coyote Removal for Deer Enhancement, 1,125 coyotes were removed from Lincoln County during a 5-year span. And the conclusion by the authors of this study is, I quote, "The results of predator removal in game management units 222 and 231 appear to have had minimal effects on the population and structure of mule deer in those respective units." I wasn't able to find how much this study costs, or this experiment costs. However, the Granite Range Project 18, which includes the removal of both lions and coyotes, has cost nearly $500,000 through fiscal year 2011. This project has removed a total of 31 lions and 812 coyotes. In keeping with your assertion that aggressive predator management should yield higher mule deer population numbers, we should have seen by now a dramatic increase in the tags in the Granite Range. And yet the tags in the Granite Range correlates with the tag allotments in bordering units. In other words, nearly $500,000 has been spent without any measurable benefit to the sportsman because the deer population has failed to increase. And if the rumor mill is indeed true, that you intend to decrease tag allotments in the Granite Range, then how can you possibly justify to the sportsmen in Nevada the enormous cost of predator control. How much money do we need to flush away? How much
Times.
money will you attempt to fleece from the Heritage Fund before this madness stops?
Fine. Thank you. Appreciate coming in. More public comment. Seeing none, we'll close public comment period and move on to item 18, which is the petition. This is Mr. Fred Jackson petitioning the commission to amend NAC 503.540 to allow the commercial take of crayfish from Lake Tahoe. The commission may deny the petition or accept the petition to initiate rulemaking. Remember, at this time, even if the commission approved the petition, that doesn't mean we're approving anything other than we'll talk about making rulemaking at this time. So come right ahead, and we had a little bit of support material on this.
Yes, sir, can I
Yeah.
pass out some support material?
Please,
to
if you got anything additional, absolutely. Yeah, we've just gotten a couple letters here.
Any motion or nothing to seek permission from the governor before the rulemaking starts. Do you have enough?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
What I'm doing is asking the commission for an approval to move forward and review an NAC 503-540. The reason I was asking for this, as it stands right now, you cannot sell crayfish in Nevada in the whole state. Now, this covers border to border, and the problem with the crayfish is they're a link to, how can I put this? They're a link to the food chain with that, the bass and invasive species of aquatic plants use the nutrients of the crayfish, and the bass actually eat the crayfish, cause a nutrients load, which causes the Eurasian milfoil and algae to bloom in the nearshore environment. The population problem is the 1967 estimated population was 57 million. 2001, the average population base in the studies was around 260 million. So that's 8.54 million per year gain in population from the earlier study to 2001. Now, if that stays in place, and that average just keeps bumping up by that figure, there'll be well over 350 million crayfish in the nearshore environment. We're only talking 40 meters to the shoreline, depth-wise. Now in the winter, they do move to deeper water, but in the summertime, they move into these nearshore environments. And as the bass and the bluegill digest these critters, basically, they pass those nutrients on through waste, and that fertilizes the water, which causes algae blooms, which causes a clarity issue with the lake. Now, when the law was passed in 1978, the issue wasn't there for the overpopulation problem and the clarity issue. Sure, there was clarity issues at the time, and they realized that the lake was declining in clarity, but as we move forward now into 2011, we need to manage this species before it gets out of control. And I would like to open a business and manage this species, not eradicate it, manage it, along with Sudeep Chandra and Endow, and harvest these things and actually sell them to a meat wholesaler here in northern Nevada. Now, this law would only pertain to Nevada, and I know California has different laws that say different, and so do we. We have a matching law, but we also hunt lions here in Nevada, and California doesn't. We manage our species. California doesn't manage that predator. Now, there's also studies been done on the minnows, the native minnows in this nearshore environment. And the dynamics of the food chain have changed to where the mysis shrimp was also introduced in the late 50s and early 60s. The Mackinac were feeding on these crayfish, but now the studies have proven that the mysis shrimp is now one of the main food sources of the Mackinac, and the crayfish has dropped in the food chain as a priority for the Mackinac. They've actually gone through a physical change, the Mackinac have. They've gone through where when they fed upon the crayfish and other minnows, their flesh color was white, and now they're turning pink, just like a salmon does and feeds out in the ocean. Their flesh turns pink. Now, nitrates and phosphates are produced by these fish wastes that they discharge into the water. If these animals, this nearshore environment, our climate has changed enough to where the bass and the bluegill that are introduced by fishermen years and years ago are now, that's their number one food source. So what they do is, to break that chain, we'd like to manage that nearshore environment, remove, not all, but manage it, some of the crayfish, sell them to a meat wholesaler. The reason I want to sell them to a meat wholesaler is I don't want to sell to the public off the dock or at a restaurant where they can get a hold of a live animal and actually remove that animal from the Tahoe Basin, take it to some tributaries where it can destroy that whole ecosystem by predating on the local minnows and the wildlife that's in that system itself. So the control factor is a lot of restrictions on this. I would like to see limited permits. All the data, the harvest data, GPS marks, all our data is going to be returned to NDOW. I would like to see it on a bi-weekly basis. I've got a lot of experience. I am an NDOW employee. I'm going to tell you that right now. This is my own personal deal that I'm going after as a business. I help manage a wildlife refuge in Mason Valley, but this is a business that I've contacted Sudeep about. I had no clue who Dr. Chandra was until I'd started studying about the crayfish, and he has guided me in some of his science and issues that Tahoe is looking at right now. And I think if we can manage the crayfish in those nearshore environments, I really think we can cause a positive effect for the clarity issue in that lake. And that's what I've got for you guys.
All right, like to, Mr. Chandra, can you chime in on this and tell us a story? And we got some numbers in front of us here.
So I just want to confirm, my name is Sudeep Chandra. I'm a professor of limnology and fisheries conservation at University of Nevada, Reno. The university does not have a position on this. I'm not positive nor negative against it. We've provided a white report that's coming up in a book that documents the history of crayfish introduction. I think that you have in front of you now, and some of the issues with the crayfish that are there, and he spoke to some of those earlier. So I just want to make that clear. We're not taking a position so much as providing facts. What I do know is that early studies that were done, that the crayfish, the species that's in Tahoe is introduced. It was introduced multiple times. As indicated earlier, so not to be to be more efficient with time, it has provided food and forage for fishes, or it's thought to in the past. But with shifts of introduction of other species like shrimp in the 60s, when the agencies introduced them, the fishery has shifted to feeding mostly on those species, we think, shrimp. And as a result, the crayfish is an incidental sort of take for Mackinac or for other game fish. This is at least what the science data supports. What it does, though, now is it means that in the 1960s, or actually mid-1970s, when the studies were conducted at that time, as the shrimp were being establishing in the lake, the crayfish population shifted from about 55 million total, what we think now today is about 220 million in the lake. And I think that's figure 2 or figure 3 in your white report there that suggests a shift as a result of shrimp introduction. Well, what that means is the population's increasing for crayfish today, and it's kind of a stored nutrient lockup, basically. It eats lots of algae. It might stimulate some of that production. It holds a lot of the phosphorates in its body, but it also poops it out, basically. It excretes it, stimulating algal growth. And now we have the introduction of multiple other warm water fish species in the near shore in the last 15 to 20 years, largemouth bass and bluegill. And what we think is happening is the proliferation of largemouth bass that's occurring in the near shore is related to them being able to feed on crayfish and also utilize plants as a habitat. So if you go fishing, of course, you're going to use crayfish imitation lures or crayfish themselves or fish on weed beds. So same thing is playing out in nature up there. My interest in this is not much so much as just being able to document that there has been an increase. We know that my student right now, 2 students are investigating crayfish ecology up at the lake and also up at Crater Lake as a control. There's an introduction of crayfish up there. The Park Service is trying to manage for them up there. What we are finding is that the crayfish feed on, not only stimulate algae growth in the near shore, but also feed on native biodiversity. It turns out Tahoe has 11 endemic invertebrates in the lake. It looks like we have about a 75% reduction since the 1960s. We're not clear if that's entirely due to crayfish. It's likely due to some of the eutrophication and nearshore algal shifts that are occurring there too in clarity. But it's likely a combination. That's our current hypothesis, and that's what our students are trying to tease apart. But the crayfish, we're betting that they're controlling native invertebrates in the lake. So from that's about all I have to say. I'd be happy to answer questions. In the last part of that white report, I put in some management caveats just from some considerations from colleagues back east. They're actually managing for crayfish that are invading their lakes in Wisconsin and Minnesota because it's disrupting the fishery and the native ecology. And they're doing whole lake removals now. Back there, the science has become sophisticated enough, and the traps have become sophisticated enough to where, like lobsters, you could manage for crayfish and then let native fish go. That will be a concern up at Tahoe. We've documented in the last year that there's been a 58% decline in native forage fish in the lake, red sides, dace, chubs, suckers. So that would be a concern for me, and I'd want to make sure that whatever permits are put into place that we don't impact non-target species like native fishes in the near shore.
Okay, just one more, and then I'll open up to commission questions, and that would be, about how many fish are you thinking you'd take out of here? How many a year?
Crayfish?
Crayfish.
You know, I'm a novice at this, and from just speaking with the guides and speaking with people who do this, they were basically telling me that they were in a larger trap, picking up 20 pounds a trap, basically, is what they were doing on the average during July, I guess it would be, mid-season. That's going to be an answer I can't answer for you guys until I get out there. I haven't been on the lake yet.
Tens
So-
of thousands a year, hundreds of thousands a year, millions a year,
I can't see millions a year, probably thousands of pounds a year.
thousands of pounds a
Yeah,
year.
it'll be a seasonal deal for myself anyway.
Just to point out, it's thought that in the 1970s there was about can't remember what it was, 1.5 million pounds of crayfish possibly in the lake, and now we're thinking there's about 8 million pounds of crayfish. So, and of course that's across the whole lake, California and Nevada. So in terms of impacting a population, who really knows if that could happen? It's just in the studies published by Charles Goldman and Abramson in 1970 suggested, well, we're shipping these crayfish to Sweden to repopulate European lakes. We should think about harvesting them here for commercial fishery, but that was never followed up. So,
Does the department have a position on this, or history, or, you know, we're more about fisheries than most of us are want to tell a story?
We could get Mark up here, but officially, we're neutral on this. We think there's potential to work with Mr. Jackson on this. We would not want to see the commercialization of crayfish across the state. They do contribute to recreational fisheries in other waters. But there's an interest at Lake Tahoe to work towards restoring the natural fisheries up there and the native fisheries. So there's certainly potential to work on this with Mr. Jackson. So.
Commissioners, we'd start with questions from the commission, and then we'll have comments from the public, and then, so if you have any comments, hold the comments, okay? Questions, let's start with Commissioner Howell, and then Commissioner Vogler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jackson, what's the size of these traps?
I've got 5 different styles of traps that we've built in the last few months. Some have 1 by 2 inch holes in them on the sides. They're round, kind of like a crab trap that you'd see down in San Francisco, if you've ever seen them on the dock.
What dimensions of the trap, I'm asking?
Dimensions, they're all different sizes. I've got some that are 3 feet around and then 1 foot tall. I've got some that are made like you would see in a river, the tubes with the cones on the end. They're 3 feet long, 12 inches around.
How many are you figuring on putting out?
I was thinking 40. There's some collapsible commercial traps that will allow the native fishes to escape. As you pull the trap, they go right out the sides.
Okay, and you're only going to do this on Nevada side?
Yes,
And you're going to check them just once a night, or?
No, we'd pull them about every 6 hours, basically what it would turn out to be. It all depends on the resource and what area you're in. Some areas might be better than others.
And they're going to be how far apart?
I couldn't answer that.
Well, the reason I'm asking is, obviously, you're going to have something in the water to be able to find the traps, so you're
Yes,
going to have a buoy or something.
There'll be a buoy, and if you read the report, I know you've just received it, I've got suggestions from other states that work for them that would most likely work for Nevada, and there's a buoy restriction size, and there's
How deep of water do you think you'll be in?
anywhere from 40 feet to 5 feet.
Okay. And 40 traps, but you don't have a clue how far apart you're going to put them?
No, sir. All depends on the bottom. All depends on the terrain that you're in.
Well, I never had any traps, but I have some nets, and we put those out, and we just bait the center of them, and they're in about 6 feet of water because I'm in my chest waders, and then when we jerk them out of the water, about every hour or so, sometimes they're just totally full. You got to pull them up fast because you're going to lose some.
Yes.
But I'm thinking, and we have the shoreline lit up. I've only got a half a dozen of them, but we have the shoreline lit up so that boaters can see that we're out there, and we're only like in 6 feet of water. And it's been my experience that we've tried it out of the boat, and when the sun goes down, they start coming towards the shore. They're feeding, and those nets get full in 6 feet of water. And we pull up, I'd guess maybe 1,000 in a night. And we reset them after we dump them in a 5-gallon bucket, and spend the rest of the night cleaning and drinking beer. But,
my concern with this whole thing, and it's a real concern. I am strictly do not want to sell to the public. This is just one of my adamant deals because of the irresponsibility of some of the folks that you would end up selling this product to. I understand navigational hazards with the rope, the lines, and the buoys and all that. But that's something that we're going to have to work out over the next couple months if you guys allow me to go forward from this point. The whole key to this working is proper data collection and information being swapped back and forth between myself, my crew, and NDOW. I don't see there would be a navigational hazard as long as we use the proper buoys and the proper stuff and the proper equipment to actually mark where we're at. I understand, sir, that you know that there's a huge population base of those animals in that Benton community.
Yeah, I'm not working out of Tahoe. I've never fished Tahoe at all, but I'm down in South. But it is a huge population if you get the right lake.
Right.
Cave Lake, for instance, has got lots of them now.
All right, Commissioner Vogler?
Mr. Jackson, I know I'm always confused, but I'm a little more confused than usual. How's that? You want to do this as an experiment with Endow and the university for a period of time, or if you can make this thing go, you want to do it forever? I mean,
I would like to see some research done, because some years might be different than other years. Some years the climate might change and it might have an effect to where we're doing something negative.
Well, you do realize that if we gave you this exclusive commercial business, or whatever, change the laws, NACs, whatever it takes to do it, we're gonna get I would think, in a bunch of trouble, because we would be restricting to one person.
I understand that, and I'm not asking for an exclusive. I'm asking for you to be prudent upon the permits that you deliver to the public. I'm not asking for a shotgun out there and just blast somebody who comes up with enough money to purchase a permit.
So
I'm
we
asking you be prudent on who you choose to give the permit to.
And how many
That's all I'm
permits
asking.
But today, anybody can go out and catch fish.
Today, with a fishing license, anybody can go out and do, and take 10,000 pounds if they wanted to. But there is no sale of crayfish in the state of Nevada.
Okay.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
Had a couple of questions. You know, others might want to sell to the public, you know, if, you know, even though you don't. So if you'd need, you know, stricter rules, because would be just for you. And the other question, do you put bait in these traps?
Yes, I would have to bait the trap to attract them.
Could you be putting more contaminants into Tahoe than taking out?
Well, if you read through, I've got a suggestion of using only legal fish that are allowed in there. That's part of the restrictions and process that we need to go through. It's going to have to be looked at in the next few months if you guys allow me to do this. It's going to have to be looked at and decided on by the biologists that are concerned with the lake and its clarity and its ecosystem.
If I could speak to that, just as a recommendation, that is something to consider, and it's possibly something you tie into your permit, because there's no reason you can't collect crayfish, chop them up, and use them as bait. So, but in essence, you're just keeping recycled.
Maybe
nutrient
quadrimussels
cycle.
or something like that.
Yeah.
You also said in here, collection will have a positive effect on the clarity and water quality of Lake Tahoe. Will such few amounts of removal from the lake really clarify Tahoe?
It depends on that's the data that we're looking for. We need to find that out. That's one of the reasons I wanted to approach you guys and find out if you're going to allow me to even give it a shot.
So, and one thing to remember too, we try to point this out in the report, that the nearshore clarity is very different than that offshore clarity. That the whole thing that you see in the newspapers is always about this disk that's lowered in the offshore. But if you live or work in this area, you know that there's more change happening in that band around the lake. So one of the ideas that from our students' work is that he's excluding crayfish in these big chambers doing research, and he's finding that the algae are depressed. So in other words, if you keep them out of these rock areas, you're actually eliminating that type of algae that you might grow there.
I know that University of California, Davis is doing a study on the clarity, and they're trying to increase the clarity with the Tahoe regional plan, and so I think this should be coordinated, because they're doing a study right now to try to increase the clarity of the water, and I think Mark's our fishery guy here, you know, this should be coordinated with that group, I would think, to see what effect they'd have, because I'd hate to do something antagonistic to their study, because they're in the process right now of making recommendations to increase the clarity of Tahoe.
Absolutely.
All right, Commissioner Macbeth.
What was the average growth of the number of crayfish in Tahoe? You mentioned the average growth.
It's hard to say if it's an average. There's only really 3 points in there, and the figure that's in the white report. But it went from about what we think is about 55 million to about 220, 240 million crayfish.
Okay.
And that's numerically. Pounds-wise, you're talking about 1 million to 8 million pounds. And then size-wise, it doesn't look like the size of the crayfish has changed much, to our knowledge.
Okay, and I imagine they've been monitoring the clarity of the water this whole time?
The clarity in the offshore. So some of the issues with scientific studies we recognize between Davis and ourselves, they're co-authors on that chapter that I submitted to you, is most of the work's been done in the offshore, not in the area in the near shore where the clarity should.
So do you have any estimate of what you'd have to take the crayfish population down to get to the clarity that that everybody desires as the goal?
You're asking $1 million question. That's exactly what our students try to get at right now. We don't have that idea quite yet.
Okay, and so now my question is what impact would the number of permits that you're going to issue have on that growth? Because it seems to me, just based on these numbers, that we've got a growth pattern that's looking like this, and it may be that we may need to have unlimited permits for crayfish. Anybody who wants to do it to have any impact on that population, to get it down where it needs to be.
Well, on the science end, one thing we do know is that an average size, slightly larger than average size crayfish is about 10 years old. So while there's a lot of numbers in the lake, it took them 10 years to get to that size. And that's atypical. In the lakes that we've studied in Northern California and Southern Oregon, we're looking at 4.5-year life cycles of growth. So, and that's largely temperature driven. So it'll be a little more complex than that, but that implies that if you harvest down a rate, if you could harvest something down, it would take a long time for it to manage, to bounce back up.
Okay, and finally, who is going to be responsible for monitoring everything that's going on to, kind of figure out what the impact's going to be on not only the crayfish, but all the other species you've talked about?
It's a good question. We have a monitoring program, the science community does, for the nearshore area. UC Davis monitors the periphyton. We collect invertebrates and minnow traps for fishes, native fish, and then we have snorkel observations. But those are not long-term monitoring. They're project by project. So that's a good question.
Okay, and then I guess for the department, what is the department's thoughts on, in other words, what is the department going to have to do if we implement this regulation? What is going to be the impact on resources of the department?
Yeah, that's once again, this is Rich Haskins, Deputy Director. The crayfish population up there is non-native. Once again, we decided we would be neutral on this and try to work with Mr. Jackson, but there's a body of people that would love to see the crayfish disappear from Lake Tahoe. They're not native, they were introduced, and you've heard that they're potentially causing environmental impacts. So once again, if this was somewhere else, we'd have a different opinion on it, but because there is this interest in Lake Tahoe of trying to manage it more for native species, I guess what I'm trying to say, if the crayfish disappeared, the only people you might hear from are the recreational folks up there that with the cabins and whatnot who go out and harvest crayfish for themselves. So I really would be surprised if Mr. Jackson could impact the crayfish population up there, what he's proposing. Now, if you get multiple permits up there, you might be able to, but the amount of effort I think he's willing to, there's other issues he hasn't, I think he needs to address, but it's outside our purview. He'll have to deal with TRPA and state lands. All buoys need to be lighted and of a certain size and marked and all that. Commercialization of Lake Tahoe is something new, so I'm not sure what entities he's going to have to deal with on that. What he's proposing here, though, is to remove the restriction in NAC that prohibits the commercial take of crayfish. We would deal with all these other issues within the permit. He would require a commercial collection of live wildlife, similar to what we have for Sacramento blackfish. So a lot of these details we would work out in that process. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. But.
All right, commissioners down here, Mr. Cavan.
Is there any movement on the California side? Is there any flavor for this on the California side, or is that?
You can answer.
Well, yeah, from the science community side, they're sort of neutral on it. We know that they impact biota and they're stimulating productivity. algal productivity. On the agency side, I don't know. I mean, the California side, in the conversations that I've had from the science side, they're pushing towards native recovery, within reasonable native recovery for native species. But I don't know if you've contacted them.
I have not contacted any agencies at this point. I was more of a wait and see in how our department responded and how you guys, your questions and stuff, and let this thing progress. This is a long process. And if I was able to do it in Nevada, then there's no reason why somebody could not do it in California. That's kind of the approach I was going to take. I was going to allow this thing to play out, and if it became a positive, then we approach California and see if they can help in the clarification problem with the management of this crayfish. I'm not sure how they'll respond to that. They have a lot of different opinions other than our own board and our own NDOW people. You don't know how they're going to react, and I don't know how they're going to react either. But if we can show a positive influence on what we're doing here, that might impact their decision on whether they want to give out some permits for harvesting. Just to manage it, not to eradicate it, just to manage that species.
All right, so wasn't anything else from Endow? Didn't have anything? Mr.
I
Warren?
don't know if Mark had any additional comments or.
Do you have any additional comments? Okay, no further questions right now for the commission. I'll have public comment, and then we can come back. Do you have a question? Commissioner Schrum?
No, I'll wait for public comment.
Okay. Public comment on this issue. I don't know if anybody had a card, but public comment, come on up.
Rex Flowers with Washoe County CAB. We support this endeavor. We'd like to see it changed. There's a lot of the questions you asked today were questions we kind of asked too, like exclusivity and stuff, and that's not going to happen. It's going to be for public, and there's going to need to be some controls. But in order to get to that point, we have to first ask, hope that the commission will approve the petition change and then work through that wording first. Thank you.
Other public comment? All right, seeing no further public comment, we'll close the public hearing on the matter. Commissioners, further questions? Commissioner Schrum, or comments, or whatever at this point?
Mr. Chairman, I have some problems with this. If this was Cummings or Cave or Sunnyside or South Fork or Illinois, I might not be so concerned, but this is up there where a lot of people are going. They're going to be putting traps out, and we go ahead and open this up for commercial purposes. We can't restrict it, I don't believe, to just one company. We have to open up to everyone, and I just don't think this is a good idea.
And throw out a few things here. Just looking at this, I guess there'd be a lot of options under NAC. We could have restrictions on the number of permits you could give out, things within that. I guess our question before us today is it worthwhile to pursue, or is it just, are we wasting our time? Is this worthwhile to pursue? So far I've heard not a whole lot of negatives, but anybody want to discuss that? Okay, go ahead. Let's start with Commissioner Vogler and Commissioner Macbeth.
I'm all for capitalism, lad. That's fine with me. And you just do this at night? Is there that? I don't know nothing about Lake Tahoe. I mean, it's over there somewhere, I guess.
It could be done 24 hours a day.
Oh, you do it 24 hours? You don't do? I thought you just did it at night.
No.
Just
this could be
Charlie
done
does it at
during the
night so
day.
you drink beer, right?
During the night. I've also had restrictions on how long you could fish after sunset in that. Just suggestions.
And you're going to have something out there that everybody, a prudent boat operator should be able to see your.
Yes. Just like a nav buoy, you'd have to have something lit up because of the after-hours traffic.
And then you'd lose your crayfish.
And then now the hard question, Are we going to all go to, be removed from this board for just cause if we try and change an NAC?
I would think that any motion that was made to approve this would include something subject to approval from an exception from the government, from the executive order.
Thank you.
Commissioner McBeth?
Have you done anything to get the temperature of the residents of Lake Tahoe where this is going to occur and the businesses around there to get any idea of what their thoughts are on this? Because we're in the middle of a bear issue, doing a bear regulation, and we found that out pretty quickly. And so anyway, I want to make sure that obviously this, if we do accept this petition and move forward on a regulation, it's going to get public. It's going to have some public notice, and the the residents will know about it. I was just curious if you've got any idea what you're looking at there.
I've spoke to some of the owners of restaurants in Lake Tahoe, and they think it's a wonderful idea. It's going to open up a whole nother niche that they can offer the tourists and the local community something that's came out of Lake Tahoe. I mean, we're talking about a pristine lake here with the whole aspect of taking this crayfish and bringing it out to the public is an economic boom. Now in the Delta, they have to purge their crayfish just because the contaminants that come down the American and Sacramento and all the tributaries that run through the farmlands. It's a $171 million business just in that local Rio Vista, Isleton area. I don't see how there would be any negatives to allowing restaurants to serve this product. It would bring gas taxes back, room taxes back, food taxes back, retail sales would go up. It would offer something different. We're losing our economic base here. Gambling is everybody's doing it now. There's got to be something to attract these folks back. Just one weekend in Isleton, their population is 850. They throw that Crawdad Festival one weekend a year. 850 become 225,000 people that show up on one weekend just to do the Crayfish Festival. Now, can you imagine if Reno offered that or Tahoe offered that? It'd be more than 200,000. We have the ability to capture these folks. And we don't need to miss out on this opportunity. Number one, I can't tell you if it's going to clear the clarity of the lake up. I don't know. I don't think anybody does. Number two, it will have a positive effect on this economy up here. It will stimulate growth in these dying communities. It's just a plus, plus, plus. I'm going to hire people to help me. There's jobs. There's thousands of people out of work. It would help NDOW. They might be able to sell more fishing license and be leading the nation in some of the cleanup of the nearshore environment of the lake. I just think it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I think that the concerns that Commissioner Shrum have with regard to like recreational boaters and homeowners on the lake and that kind of thing are what I realize the restaurants will, that's going to be a plus. Well, I guess my bottom line here is it sounds like these crayfish are almost like an invasive species if they are not, in fact, an invasive species, and we should probably be doing anything we can, to get rid of this. And so I'm inclined to accept the petition, but just want you to understand that is just the beginning of the process. And during that process, some of the things that Commissioner Shrum is speaking about are going to come to light. And at that point, the commission will have to make a decision whether it's worth doing it based on the response we get from the from the community up there.
I understand that.
Fair enough. Homeowners genocide. I'll throw out. Sounds reasonable. A lot of positives, minimal negatives. Most of the negatives are going to involve a fight that isn't ours, which involves the TRPA, things associated with Lake Tahoe, in locals there. But that's not our deal. We need more business. This doesn't hurt anything. Lots of positives. Not much negatives. We might find some negatives later on, and we would like, if you had any motion to approve, I would prefer if, it said something pursuant to Approval and exception for executive order. But go ahead.
I move to approve the petition subject to the governor's council's approval.
Second.
A discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, if this is approved, I would almost mandate we'd have a representative, the TRPA and California Fish and Game representative here to discuss their issues, because they share half the lake, and I think those people should be on board with this when we discuss regulations, stuff like that, because they own half the lake and they're very involved, and we need them on board because we don't, as discussed, when you get the public involved with lawsuits and that, I'd like to have the governing agency of Tahoe on board with this plan where they can't see anything. So I think those two agencies should mandate that be here when this is discussed.
Further discussion? Does everybody understand the motion on the floor? All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 7-1. Commissioner Schrum opposed. All right. Thank you very much. Some great information, and good luck.
Thank you.
Heaven forbid you make a buck. Good luck.
You take any time off? Is that it? Budgets?
Let's see, what do we got? Anybody need a break before we hammer?
God, we made them all mad. Everybody laughed.
Take 5?
There's no way you convince me
Take 5?
this gentleman is